Hello. So, I've been working on this film recently and I wanted to talk to you about a shot that I've been working on this past week, which is this one. This is what the original shot looked like. And to be clear, this is a test shot. This is not the actual shot in the finished film. This was just something we filmed so I could practice the effect to make sure I could actually do it. And the effect was the location we were filming in had blank white walls, which, at the best of times is not very interesting. But also the location we needed for the script was sort of described as a dingy sort of B&B. And this was just a little bit too nice. So the director called me up while he was on a location scout one day and asked me if I could do anything to the walls. I can't remember if the wallpaper was his suggestion or mine or the production designer. I'm not sure who actually came up with that idea, but we decided to do it. And so I went down one of the days with the director and the cinematographer who filmed this test shot for me. And I was able to take it into Blender, motion track it, recreate the set virtually in 3D space, and then plaster these white walls with this floral wallpaper. And I'm pretty excited about the fact. I think it's kind of seamless. I don't think you'd ever guess that this is a visual effects shot. And that's, this film is kind of full of those sorts of shots. It's a drama. It's the sort of film you'd expect to have no visual effects, except they're sort of all over the place. Little things like this where you're sort of using them for production design purposes, which is really exciting. And so I wanted to talk through the process of actually doing this shot because it was surprisingly straightforward. Once you worked at a few little kinks along the way, it actually was kind of easy. And I think the results are great. So I'm definitely going to be using this effect more. And I just wanted to show you how I did it. So let's jump into it. So you can go ahead and open a new project. And up the top here, we're going to click this little plus, go down to VFX and open a new motion tracking panel. And you should get a menu that looks like this. So the first thing you're going to want to do is open your footage. So if you want to use the entirety of your clip, motion track the entirety of it, you can just click Set Scene Frames here, and it'll just set the frames appropriately. If not, you can just set your frames down at the bottom. So I'm going to start on frame 1 and end on frame 150. Once you've done that, you're ready to start tracking the scene. So what I recommend doing here is, first of all, just taking a second to think about your shot. So as I play through my shot here, you'll see that it doesn't really move all that much. It is handheld, but Kate, the cinematographer, is standing still. If your shot is actually moving from left to right, you want to think about your motion model. I think it's the first thing to start with. So perspective is a good one to use. If the perspective is changing a lot, that's a good option to use. But that's important to set right first because the computer's going to handle it differently based on which motion model you use. So the next thing to do is to start adding in your tracking markers. And to do this, we need to pick a frame that represents the entirety of the shot as well as it can. And so what I mean by that is generally you want to pick a frame that's sort of in the middle of your scene because tracking points that are in the middle of the shot are more likely to be at the beginning and the end than, say, if you pick a shot that's on frame 1. By the time you get to frame 150, that might be framed out of the shot. So I recommend starting in the middle, and then you can track backwards from there and forwards from there, and that generally works the best. So to start adding in tracking points, you can do it manually. Control-click on any part of the frame and it'll add a tracking point. That's good if you have tracking markers in there, which when we did the actual shot, I did have tracking markers there because I was there on set, so I was able to add them in. I just used a little bit of blue tack with some black marker on it, and I stuck them around the frame. And so you can just go in and control-click on those points and start tracking them. But the computer can also detect features for you if you click the button, Detect Features. So let's click that. And you can see it's added in a few there. It's only added in 3 for me, which is very low. And that's probably on account of all the white walls. There's not really a lot in this shot for the computer to track. So it's judged that there's only 3 points here that sort of meet its standard to be considered trackable. Now the good thing is you can adjust that standard, and you do it by opening this little menu here, the Detect Features menu. And you'll see, and you'll see that you get 3 options here. You get margin, threshold, and distance. And what these refer to is the margin around the edge of the frame in which it's not going to select tracking points because, 16 pixels on the edge of frame, if you're selecting something there, it's very likely to go out of frame and then it's useless. So I recommend leaving that alone. But if you're not getting a lot of tracking points, what you want to do is lower the threshold because the threshold is sort of the quality bar which the tracking point has to exceed for the computer to consider using it. And so the lower you go that, the more options the computer is going to have because it's going to accept tracking points that maybe it hasn't judged to be sort of the ideal tracking point. So I'm going to turn it all the way down to 0. And you can see I get a bunch of tracking points. Now, A lot of these are going to be wrong. The computer's probably not going to be able to track them, but that's fine. We don't need to worry about that now. And then the other setting you can adjust is the distance, and that's the distance between tracking markers that it'll consider. It doesn't need to track too many, at the same point, so it's naturally set. So it's automatically set at 120, but you can lower that to like something like 80, and you'll see you even get more tracking markers there. So that's great. So once you have a bunch of tracking markers that look to be on good spots, you can now click A to select all of them, and then you can track forwards by hitting this button, and off we go. You can see some of them are just going red straight away, which means if they go red like that, it means that they're done. They can't track it. But most of them seem to stay on target. So now we can go back to the middle and then click track backwards, this button, and now we're tracking all the way backwards. You can see a few more of them are starting to go red there. But it looks to be doing pretty good. A bunch of them are staying on target, so that should be good. And so once that's done, you can see now your tracking markers are represented on this graph here. And you can see already, you can sort of see the ones that aren't working. But you don't need to worry about them yet. First thing we're going to do is go to the solve panel, and we're going to not check tripod. If you're doing a static shot, you can check tripod, obviously. But you can go to keyframe A and keyframe B here. These are useful if you're doing a shot that, again, starts in one place and ends in another. You can give it keyframe A and keyframe B, and those are to sort of help the computer recognize the two different aspects of the shot. Again, this shot's fine, so we don't need to worry about it too much, but I might keep, keyframe A on 10 and then set keyframe B to like 130 or something. And then you can check focal length, optical center, radial distortion, and then you can click solve camera motion. And let's see what we get. Oh wow, okay, so up here you'll see this is going to give you your solve error. And we've actually got a really good one. We started off with a good one, 0.85 pixels. So typically you'll get something like, it can be anywhere between 1 and like 20 pixels or something. And so what this is this is the number, this is sort of the average pixel error that is returned from your track. And basically what that means is that it takes all of these tracking points, it averages them out, and it tells you how far off the track is. So basically how far away the average tracking point was from where the computer expected it to be versus where it actually was. And so, yeah, normally you'll get it, it's like 20 pixels off. And what that means normally is that, probably most of your tracking points are perfect, but there's a few that are just like wildly off. And so they just throw off the whole average. But in this case, it's below 1 pixel, which is great. That's basically what you're trying to get to. Anything below 1 pixel is sort of imperceptible, but I think for good practice, just try to get that number as low as you possibly can. I mean, 0.00 is a perfect track, so we're still slightly off, but that's a really good first result. So your result probably won't be that good. You might get a pixel error of 5 or something, and you need to bring that number down. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So below the solve panel, there's a panel called cleanup. You can open that drop-down menu, and you can see it gives you a few little things to adjust here. So the first thing we're going to adjust is the error. And basically this is going to filter out any tracks that have an error bigger than the number you set, and then you can delete those from your track. Because we have so many options, we only need 8 to get a good track. So we can delete all the worst ones and resolve, and then hopefully as we keep filtering out these tracking points that aren't doing well, that number, our solve error, will just keep coming down and down and down. So the first thing you can do is you can just start deleting, any of these ones that have turned red, because those ones are clearly no good. But the computer can also do that for you. If you just click filter tracks, it just gives you all these terrible tracks, or almost all of them. I don't know why I didn't select all of them, and then you can just delete them. But now what we want to do is we want to start weeding out all the tracks that are bringing up our average. Again, we want that to be as low as we can, so we need to start finding the tracks, the outliers that are, have a pixel error of 2 or something like that. So what we can do is we can set that error here, and any track that has an error higher than the number we set will be highlighted, and then we can delete it. So I'm going to start, because my solve error is so good, I'm just going to start by setting this to 1. And we'll click clean tracks, and boom, that's popped up a bunch of ones that must have an error bigger than 1. So you can just, once they're all highlighted, you can just click X, delete track, and then you can solve your camera motion again, and we'll see what we get. And now we have a pixel error of 0.32, which is fantastic. So now it means that the average pixel is off by 0.32, which of course means that many of them are probably off by like 0.1, and then there's probably some of them that are still off by a little more than that. So we're going to turn the error down. We're going to do it to 0.5 now, and then let's click clean tracks again. And it's brought up 2 more, I think just 2 or 3, that are off by more than 0.5. X to delete. solve camera motion again, 0.29. So that's great. You're pretty much good to go now. But before you move on, I recommend doing one more thing, which is if you're reconstructing your set digitally, these tracking markers are a really helpful way to figure out where everything is actually meant to be, because once you translate this into 3D geometry, these tracking markers are all going to represent the different surfaces. You're able to place your virtual objects where the tracking markers are, which means that we want to make sure that anywhere we're going to be placing a virtual object, there is a tracking marker for us to use. Otherwise, you kind of have to do a bit of guesswork as to where something is, and that can often present problems when it comes to setting the scale correctly, which is important because if your footage was filmed on a wide lens, there's going to be distortion as things get closer and further from the lens. So you want to make sure everything's scaled correctly. And it's a problem I ran into when I did this the first time, which is I didn't account for that. So when I started making the walls to put wallpaper on them, they actually weren't, it was almost like forced perspective. Some of the walls were massive and they were in the distance. And to my eye, it looked like they were small, but really close. And actually only when I went out of camera view did I realize that they weren't scaled correctly. And so it actually didn't match the camera motion. Don't worry if you don't understand that. Basically what I'm saying is anywhere where you want to put an object, you want to make sure you have a tracking point so you can use that tracking point later to place the object correctly. So before we move on, we want to make sure that there are tracking points where we need them. So I'm going to pop in here and I'm just going to start Control click to just add my own tracking points. I'm going to just pop them all over the place here, and just some of these will fail again, and if they do we can just delete them, no worries, but it's good to just, I think this is good practice. I'm going to pop some here. I'm also going to try and put them on this wall. Now I know in the past I've had a lot of trouble with this wall because there's like literally nothing to track, but I think the best chance you have is if you put them like down here. But hopefully on your footage it's not just blank white walls you're tracking, so it might be a little easier. So I'm going to select all my tracking points again, and I'm just going to track forward. Oh, and look at that. It's actually going quite well. We've lost the ones on the right hand wall, which is okay, but I don't think that can be avoided, so I'm just going to delete all the ones that have gone red because those didn't work. And then I'm going to solve camera motion again. And now we've got a pixel error of 0.61, which means we just have to do the same process again of going through and cleaning all the ones that didn't work. And this time I'm going to show you a different way you can do it, which is to go to, I think it's this menu up here. Yes, you can click Info. And then if you go back here and click A to select all, it actually brings up the average error of all the tracking points. And so now you can just go through manually and you can see like, okay, this one has an error of 0.7, get rid of it. 0.7, get rid of it. 0.5, get rid of it. 0.6, gone. So you can see. Average error of 4.5 pixels. Bye. And so let's try solve camera motion again. Now we're down to 0.3 again. I mean, we can just keep doing this, to be honest. There's no harm. Okay, cool. And that's solve camera motion one last time. 0.25. Perfect. So that's a quarter of a pixel. That's good enough for me. So once you have a track you're happy with, and you might want to go further than I did there, and that's fine. You can go all the way down to scene setup. You can click setup tracking scene. And that's going to pop it up into the viewport here. And if you press play up here, now you'll see that it creates a camera up here with the actual motion that it's tracked from your camera, which in this case is so cool because it's, you know, it's literally just Kate, the cinematographer, holding the camera, and it's now tracked and inside Blender, pixel perfect, or, you know, it's off by a quarter of a pixel, but we're not going to split hairs. And there you go. You can see now your thing is just floating around in the frame perfect. It's every single jitter of the camera is accounted for. And yeah, it's seamless. So that's great. Now we've tracked the scene. You can click set as background as well. That's kind of useful. And then the last thing you want to do in this panel is just start setting your scale and your orientation correctly. So we can hop back up here and turn info off because we don't need to see that anymore. So the first thing you want to do is set the origin. So you can just pick a point in the middle of your scene and do that. And then you want to pick a point that's like along the x-axis from your origin point. So I'm going to pick this one. and click set as x-axis, and you can see now that's moving sort of in the right direction. And then you want to pick a point that's along the y-axis, which is the horizontal axis in this case, and click set y-axis. And now you can see that's sort of set correctly. It's not perfect yet because we need to do a few more things. I find that this part often doesn't work well, so I've gotten really used to, like I did a test of this earlier and it worked perfectly, and now it doesn't, and it often doesn't. So I'm going to show you what I just do, which is I just hop in here and I just do it myself. Just select the camera and literally just start rotating things until it matches. And it's actually kind of really easy. And I kind of prefer doing it this way, to be honest. It's a lot easier. So you can just start syncing things up this way, you know? And in a few seconds, you've got your origin set up perfectly. So now you can see as you track things, it all works great. So let's delete that, you know. And, you know, if you scale this up, you've got a floor. So now the scene's set up. Now we need to start building our walls to put the wallpaper on. And so the way to do this, the first thing to do is to go to the overlay panel here, click this, go down to motion tracking. And once you click that on, you'll see we get our points back. And these are great. And that's great to have now because now that's great to have because what I was talking about earlier is when you go out of camera view here and you actually look at these points for a second, you can actually start to tell the shape of the hallway. You see here, like this is the hallway here running along here, and this is where like the stairs go up. And so like if you look at it from the camera point of view, so like that's the hallway there. Pop back in the camera point of view, and now you can see it. You know, you can sort of see the perspective of it. It's not the best version of it, actually. I've done this shot so many times, and every time I get a different result. Sometimes it's much clearer, like, and you can see the walls really clearly, but for our purposes, you only need an indication of where they are to actually get to work. So now we can just start adding in our geometry. So the reason I was saying earlier that you want a tracking point everywhere where you're going to be building a wall is for exactly this reason, which is I can select this tracking point here. I can hold Shift S, cursor to selected, that adds the cursor there, and now I can just add in a cube, and off we go. We can just start building the walls. So let's rotate this. Let's rotate this a little bit on the x-axis, bring it up, and you can just start lining it up with the geometry of the scene, which is really cool. And now look at that, you got a wall in 3D space. And so the next thing to do is just basically keep doing that. We can move this cursor down here, Shift S, cursor to selected. And so the way to tell if this is really working is once you get to this point, if you're scaling things up and moving them down and everything is just, all the lines are just matching up perfectly with the original footage, you know you're on the right track. So let's pop in here, let's scale that up, let's drag this edge down, and you can see the way that just fits, like boom, perfectly just sort of fits into the just perfectly fits into the original footage. That's exciting. And then we can grab this and drag it up, and you can just see the way it fits. It's so good. And there, and then we can drag that and extrude it down on the y-axis. You can actually probably drag it down a little bit like that. And then take these and bring them up to the ceiling, like so. Drag this back, extrude this back. Add in edge loops, edge loop there, edge loop there. Extrude this down. Okay, I'm being a little messy here, but you get the point. And now it all should just be playing nice. There you go. You can see it's sort of tracked perfectly onto the scene there. And you know, you can keep going if you want. You know, that's all I need to do for this scene. But you know, you can extrude this across on the Y and then extrude this down on the Z axis. And then we should be able to take these two and extrude them right back up here. And now we've removed the stairs from our set. And then we can take this and grab these and bring them down. And so now you've just built a new room. And so as you have all this, now it's time to texture it. And this is the fun part. So let's select select all our different walls, and we can click Control J to join them together if we want, or you can keep them separate. And now we can click that to add in a new material. We can make it an image texture, and now we can just go grab our wallpaper texture. I like this one. Tab into edit mode, select, hit A to select everything. I can do Q projection, and now you're getting some wallpaper. Scale it way down. And now look at that, you've got wallpaper on your walls. And and here's a really fun thing about this effect is that once you have in your wallpaper, because we've got the background image here, we can actually light the wallpaper to match the lighting of the real location. So you can we have a tracking marker on this light up here. So I can go cursor to selected, and then I can hit A, add in a light, add in a point light. Let's go into rendered view so we can see what we're doing. And we can change that to match the bulb that was actually on set, so it was slightly yellow. And then like make it an 80-watt bulb or something like that, slightly orange. It was probably in reality like 40 watts or something like that. And now, look at that. Our set is being lit correctly. And I think there's another light up here, so we can duplicate that and slide that up here. And now when we overlay it back onto the footage, it's going to match really well. And that's great because, now we're lighting a virtual set using the actual light, with lights placed like mathematically perfectly to where they were on the real day, which is really cool. So the way I like to finish this is that I render it as an overlay, which you can then take into your compositor of choice and just place it back on top of the original footage, which means that you have the original and the wallpaper, and you can color correct those independently instead of just baking them together in Blender, which you can do, but I don't think that's the best way to do it. So down here in your render properties, if you go to film and then click transparent, and now if you go into rendered view mode, yes, we should get this alpha background. And that means that when we render this, it's just going to be the wallpaper and nothing else. Or any other objects you have in the scene. You could put a painting on the wall, or you can, add props in and stuff, but it's not going to render the background image there. And once you do that, you should get something that looks like this. And hopefully nobody will ever know that the wallpaper isn't real. So yeah, I'm super excited about the possibilities of an effect like this, because it's just, it's a digital production design, Lily O'Neill was the production designer on this film, and she's amazing, went above and beyond, and I'm sure she would have wallpapered these walls if she was allowed to, but she just wasn't, and the location was, otherwise perfect. It was logistically great, and it had everything we needed except for these walls. And so to be able to do this digitally and to do it for free, there's no expense here, really just time. I think that's a great asset for filmmakers. So yeah. I hope this was useful, and I hope you can use it to go off and, I don't know, wallpaper a wall or something. So yeah, I hope this was useful, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.